just going to be a snapshot of a lot of things, however important. So to start off, we do a lot at secondary school, and I want to foreground the fact that service action is one of our major trust areas as school, because we really want to push community action in a big way. Our students have gone out and they have looked at a lot of things, they've gone and done lots of good work with animal shelter, with NGOs, they've done a lot of good work. We also have a lot of arts happening, we have a lot of music happening. We've been doing Abhivyaktī, we've been now this year we're looking at a musical that will come up, lots happening again. But in the classroom also there's a lot of action, as you can see, and in the sports ground. So we do look at sports and academics very carefully, because that's a big one for us. And that's also part of the vision of the school in terms of the sports, sports being an area that we take pride on, and we want to encourage our students to take that majorly. We will also be looking at subjects. Yes, the primary school does have very transdisciplinary areas, and I will talk about that in 2 minutes. But middle school is where we all know subject areas now. And that's the big one, and I know you heard that as well earlier this morning. Subjects become a reality. That is, now they enter into, when I say enter, I mean when they sit in an English class, in a maths class, in an INS, which is social sciences for us in our terminology, in a science class, in a design class, they are studying those subjects. And that's pretty much the first thing for us to recognize for them. And that's a big change for them, because they've not studied, they have studied subjects, but they've studied that under the theme. Now they study those subjects. Now assessments become more carefully thought of, and report cards come in now, which are like great report cards, like I say. So, but who we are as a team, and I'll briefly introduce ourselves in secondary. Of course, Mr. Sharma, Mr. Alex right there, they're always there with us. So, I mean, you know that they are, of course, the whole school guidance today, mentors. But at secondary school, we have Mr. Nani, she's right here. Mr. Nani, she's the principal of secondary school. And then it's me, I'm Sumit, I'm the MYP coordinator. And then we also have Ms. Kiranjaya, the one who also put the transition together. She was quite careful in the way it was happening and the way she was recording them and then put it out together. She's a grade level coordinator for MYP. So that's pretty much us in terms of our leadership. But of course, all teachers, all subject facilitators are also right there to welcome you. And they are also a very interesting, robust team who comes with a lot of experience and a lot of diverse understanding of the situations around us in that sense. But what's our journey? And I said it's our journey, it's not really just the students, it's your journey as well. From the PYP for most of us, in other cases the CBSE, in some cases Cambridge, the journey is from one model of understanding to the other. And I want to focus on that and get all of us aligned with it. Before I go ahead, of course, I'll now put a bigger picture of this together. But what do you think is common in both these pictures? What is the one thing that you think stands out of both these pictures? Are these visible to everyone?
Approaches to learning.
Approaches to learning is common. International mindedness is common. Okay, what else is common? What do you see? Maybe focus on the heart of the circle. Where is that heart line? The heart, literally the center. Where is that?
Teachers student coordination.
If you can see, who is that?
The student, the child.
Great. So what stays from the IB and across all programs is the focus on the student. Anything we do, everything we do, choices we offer, experiences we offer, they are extremely student focused. Of course, there are some non-negotiables as well. We are going to be offering some very clear ideas of what should be, what should not be. But most of our work centers around what students' learning is going to be like. And that is the biggest win for us. Of course, international mindedness, the idea that one must feel wherever they are in the world, one must feel home, is a reality that comes from, and I will explain further. Approaches to learning, approaches to teaching, all of these are essentially very pedagogical ideas that we engage with. But for you as parents, what I would definitely, and that my tagline, you keep hearing this from me the whole year, is in the MYP, do not just ask them, what did you study? Ask them, how did you study? The question of what is not the only question you must ask. And I'll tell you what, that's the most common question we end up asking. What are you studying? How much content have you got finally? We are not looking at content. We might not be doing chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. We are looking at big ideas, and that might sometimes seem, what are you really doing? I don't get it. That's fine. You don't have to get it. Let the student get it. Your support has to be more in terms of, have you organized yourself? Have you got everything you need for this? Have you understood the requirements? Have you got what this project is going to be about? Do you know what the next week is going to look like for you? Do you know, okay, do you think that this source is the best source you can take for this project? The questions have to start changing to make them more internationally minded, if I may. The question doesn't have to be always about how many things did you study. You studied something, but today I might have done some group work. But in that group work, did I really take the lead, or was I the organizer of the group? Was I the conflict resolution person of the group? Who was I in the group? That's an important skill, right? That's what skills are. So the point being, the focus is about subjects, the focus is all of it is there, but actually it is the learner who we want to know. And it's not a very neat journey, is what I can say. It's a messy journey. So who are we? And I'll just put out some experience to build some credibility in us. Ms. Sunali, of course, accomplished educator, accomplished IB and GCSE educator across the board, has a lot of experience. So I'm just not going to read that out, but I'm just putting it for credibility purposes. That's Ms. Sunali. I've also been dealing with something around MYP, around BP, around Cambridge, around working with the IB at different levels. So when we say something, when we think of something, we have a lot of credibility in terms of our thought, is what I'm going to place to the table. And of course, Ms. Kiran has the experience, has the width of work that she's done along, not just design, but in terms of care of students. And I think that is definitely required when they come to grade 6 and then grade 7, MYP 1, 2, etc. But at large, our team has multiple examiners, and that really helps because, and I'll tell you why that's important. We have workshop leaders, we have validation members, we have people who know what they're doing. But at the heart of it, we're all very, very considerate, very empathetic people. Of course, if there is something that you suggest to us, we are very prompt in taking that in our consideration. We will have a conversation when we think we have a different opinion from you, but I can definitely tell you we engage in good conversation about what the learning journey for us is. So yes, we went to the MYP, and I want to talk about this now. Like I just said, you are very transdisciplinary, that is, you are looking at issues and then seeing what you require to understand the issue. Be it climate change, you are looking at how do I need to understand climate change. The conversation becomes different. I still study climate change, for example, but I studied in different subjects as well. So I've also learned theories, methods, and the depth of what subjects are. We have all studied, so we know that there are certain depths that you require, and that depth gets provided in the separate disciplines. There is going to be times that students will be doing something that we call an IDU, that is interdisciplinary unit. In that, they will be bringing two subjects together. That might seem a little tough for them to begin, but eventually they start enjoying that experience because they start seeing how there are different phases in which they can learn, and not just studying English and a math and a science, but they can see how art and English can come together in one lesson. So they see that integration. Is that something that I can say is like a neat container? It requires that sort of vigor, and that's when students will feel, I don't get what's happening. That's fine. The point is to engage with it. The IB is very clear about one thing, and I'm saying this out of experience of examining higher level papers, the IB does not say, I want a perfect outcome, I want a perfect answer which is beautiful and complete in all regards. I need you to show me the skills that you are required to show in the task. Can I say, and I'll ask a very quick question, can you say that somebody, when they write an answer or when they write a paragraph, you can say critical thinking is perfect? Can we ever say we have achieved the highest level of critical thinking ever? Can you always say that my communication is the best? Right? There's always a journey, right? My thinking in this answer is the best thinking that you would have shown. It's the perfect thinking. There's always a scope for better. Always. So we are not looking for perfection, we are looking for authentic skills, which will not look neat and clean and it will not look like that, but we want good work to come out. So largely, disciplines serve one purpose, they give you the depth. Interdisciplinary gives you the understanding of real world issues. So now what's the difference? And I know that this came up in our conversation yesterday, so this Guru and I were talking about it, and that's when this conversation came up. And I, to be honest, did not remember this, but she remembered it. That was very kind of her. She said, you know what, that example of how you go from a stew to a cake and in between there is a salad is how we remember the difference of all of these. I'll quickly run you through this. So when you think about a cake, you can't really distinguish its various ingredients, right? You don't know whether baking powder is, you don't know whether sugar is, you don't know whether, you can taste it of course, but you can't separate it, right? It's all mixed. That's what transdisciplinary is. Everything is mixed. You can't separate out the ingredients. Something like multidisciplinary is a salad where you can see what's going on. You can see every single vegetable or whatever you put, you can see every part of it. But something that is interdisciplinary, like I was saying, is more like a stew. You can see them, but not exactly what's going on. It's like a mix of, it's like a middle ground of the two. Right? So we are going to be in the space of more or less the stew and some parts of salad. And cake was what was more middles. It was primary school. So let me put it this way. There was a lot of sweetness there, and now the sweetness translates to some health and some other flavors now that you come. But no, we are also very sweet, let me say. Salad may be sweet as well, right? So, nonetheless. So, the larger point being that we work in the space of these two more than the third one. Now, I'll come to this in a minute and then I'll move into the technicality of it. Just one thing I want you to note. The subjects are in the second outermost circle. What is the closest or rather closer is service action. So we want our students to study subjects. They will study all the subjects. But for us, it's more important how are they going to use those subjects. I'll give you another example. I was talking to a student just yesterday, and because we have a big event coming tomorrow, and I'll talk about that as well. In that event, they're doing something in science. And the question I asked was, why do I need to know this? Why do I need to care about studying the scientific theory? And the student said, you know what? If you study this, you will be able to understand what the solution can look like. He was explaining the whole journey to you. For me, that was a big. Because I am not learning the theory because I want to learn that theory. I am learning the theory because there is a certain purpose to it. And that purpose can be anywhere. And the way the student articulated that to me, I was hoping, I was thinking I asked a very tough question, but the way the child opened up to the idea that I am studying the science theory, but I know that the science theory and that is atom to be specific, but I can't see atoms, but I know that if you study atoms, you know what a molecule can be and whole theory about how water can be made. It's a very interesting journey when the child is that on, right? That's what we want, the why, not just the what. So what you're studying has to have a certain purpose. And I'll come to the other terms that you see. So the focus stays on something called approaches to learning. And the PYP parents know about this, I'm sure. You've heard this and you've seen this a lot. But for everyone to be on the same page, what is approaches to learning? There are 5 approaches to learning, largely, the way IB gives us. Self-management, communication, social skills, research skills, thinking skills. Very simply put, these are the ingredients of what you want in a learner today in the 21st century. Very simple. You need someone who can communicate well. You need someone who can organize themselves. You need someone who can think critically about different things. You need someone who can just not work by themselves but in a group. You need all this. Now where does this come? This also comes in your classes. Now imagine I am teaching my English class or my math class. I am not just doing concept after concept after concept after concept. Why? Because I got to do this as well. If I just do exercise after exercise after exercise, when will I build this? So where will it happen? It will happen in your classroom. And then what happens? I can't do all the content and do all of this and imagine that magic will happen. No. So therefore there is a very careful consideration of content that we will teach and the skills we have to teach. And we have to teach them by the way. We can't just assume that a child will become a self-organized person just by the fact that they're in school. I can't just assume that they will become better at communication if I don't help them. Now that requires lesson time. So lesson time means I need to take that into account. So therefore, when you see the unit plans unrolling, you will see a mix of both. You will see skills also happening and you will also see content happening. But again, I can't just go content, and then say this will happen. Won't happen. I need time for this. So therefore, when you look at an MYP class, it's a mix of both. It's a mix of content and skill. To give you a further example, when it comes to, let's say, thinking skills, thinking in science is different from thinking in social science. I need to do that also. It's not the same. Communication in math is putting all the steps out. Communication in English is having a well-organized paragraph. So it's lots of things we're trying to put in. And I want you to recognize that right at the start of MYP, we are trying to build in all of this along with content in our classes. But in middle school, this is important. If I have a learner who can communicate what's happening, if they can tell me the limitations of their research, I have done a good job because they know what skills they need to succeed. Content is important, but that gets accessed anyway. This is where the hard work is, and that's where the students have to work. That's why if you go back what I said, don't just ask what you studied, how you studied. What is the skill that you require to do this? And let me tell you, in MYP 5, that is grade 10, exam questions are like this. What do you think you require to complete this investigation? They don't just ask you to complete the investigation. They don't ask you to recall all the chapters you learned. They will ask you, what are the 2 factors you require to make this experiment successful? Can you just learn that? No. So that needs to be acquired. So it's a 5-year journey they're on of getting this. It's a very simple circle, but it requires a lot of work. Right? And I know that everyone, PYP parents would definitely know this, but for everyone, these are just very important skills you require when we now think about, if we go back, if we knew how to organize ourselves better, our lives would have been probably different. Now, what are the subjects? Now, I've come to it very late in the day, by the way. I did not talk about subjects till now, but now I need to. So, you have English, which is language literature. That's the basic English that we all know. English, it has language elements and literature. Then you have language acquisition. You have 3 languages that we offer in language acquisition, which is French, Spanish, and Hindi. And they choose one of these languages for the next 5 years. So they can't switch. If they choose one in MYP 1, it continues till MYP 5. They pick one language. Integrated humanities or individuals in societies as we might call it, we use these terms very interchangeably. Basically, it's social science for us. So it's a combination of history, geography, civics, politics, all of that together comes as integrated humanities. Now sciences are, we have something called integrated sciences till MYP 1, 2 and 3, that is grade 6, 7, 8. You do one class called sciences. But in grade 9 and 10, you do separate classes of physics, chemistry, biology. But that's only in the last 2 years of the program. In the first 3 years, you do integrated sciences. Mathematics is basically mathematics, as we know. But in MYP 4 and 5, that is grade 9 and 10. So when I say 1, it is 6, 2 is 7, 3 is 8, 4 is 9, 5th is 10. And the program gets over in MYP 5. So MYP 5 is when they take something called the E-assessment, online exams. I won't touch upon very broadly, I won't not in depth, but very broadly I'll touch upon. So then it goes into standard and extended, but that goes much later, after 3 years of the program. That goes into standard and extended maths, so students take one. And then we have a very robust form of robust e-portfolio range. Now what are portfolio subjects? Portfolio subjects are those where you require to build a portfolio over time. So visual art, music, theatre, dance, physical health education, which is not sports, sports is separate. Physical health education is separate. And design, which is product and digital design. So these are our portfolios. Our learners in MYP 1, 2 and 3 will study all except one language, will study everything. That is, this is a requirement of the program when you put it, that for 3 years you need to give an exposure to the student to everything. And then in MYP 4, they choose. That's the first subject choice they will make. What they want to do. But that is a later conversation. Having said that right now, they just need to do all except the second column they pick. And they continue that for 5 years. The language. Because language runs in phases. Yeah, we can take it. So in IBDP you also have, so in there you have something called language B, which is what this falls into. And we have something called ab initio. Now, this is for grade 11 by the way, for everyone. But the way you start the language, you study it in 5 years. If you studied a language before, then earlier, then in grade 11 you have to take Spanish B or French B, or Hindi does not have ab initio anyway. So Spanish and French you take the B language, you can't take ab initio. Ab initio you can take for a student who has never studied. So if you want to change that becomes ab initio, but that's a later conversation we can have separately. But basically 5 years they choose the language. Everything else happens in MYP 1, 2, 3 and MYP 4 they make a choice. Okay. Any other questions on this right now? Yes, please.
I just have one question.
Yes, please.
In the sciences, for example,
Yes.
you said integrated sciences, and my understanding from what you said is that for the next 2 years perhaps, or 3, there will be an integrated learning of science. So there won't be any distinction between you're doing biology or physics or chemistry. It will all come together in some form, but it will be science.
So there will be, yeah. So as you go along, in the first 2 years, yes, because there's a lot of scientific method and all that, so it will seem like it's coming together. But by MYP 3, that is grade 8, the distinction starts becoming apparent. Though it's called integrated sciences, but then you have a unit in physics, a unit in chemistry, a unit in biology. So by 8th, but you start seeing those differences, largely till from grade 8.
So the choice that you're making, you're saying would come in MYP 4 is for mathematics as well as science?
That is actually at science, at math, and at portfolio.
Math, science and English.
And so that's the choice that we make.
But the language
Language decision stays. Because don't change the languages simply because languages don't run in grades, they run in something called phases. So when I say phase, I need the language to run, that is I do phase 1 and 2 first. So I do it till about grade 7, and then grade 8, 9 I look at about phase 3, 4 depending on the student's comfort with the language, and then they take the exam. If I do phase 1 and 2 now and then I do again phase 1 and 2 of another language, it takes me no time. So it runs in phases on how comfortable you are getting with the language, and it's a very good thing to continue one language because then you become almost proficient at it as well. It's a good idea.
Yeah, the third section it says
Science.
integrated humanities.
Yeah.
So how it gets evolved further or mixes up that I would need to
So for
understand.
5 years we do integrated humanities only. So that, but when we do that, within that again, the distinction between a history unit, a geography unit, an economics unit, that becomes apparent, but only towards the later part. But because I have social sciences stay as integrated, because when I'm studying revolutions, I study the social, economic, ethical impact of all of this
All
together.
combined.
All combined.
Yeah.
So I study social issues, you can say roughly in the first 2 years. Then after that, the distinction between the subjects starts getting more apparent. So we don't immediately put them into subject specificities. It's a very carefully, gradually thought out program of movement from a very collective lens to a more specific lens. Yeah. Okay?
So what is the basis of having this language acquisition only 3 languages? Can't we have more options in that?
So Spanish, French, Hindi are primarily the options, or rather they are the most sort of prevalent options for languages. As a school, we have chosen Spanish, French, Hindi. That's pretty much a standard decision level of many.
How, like, as a parent or as a child,
Yes.
himself or herself, they're gonna understand the language, which one is better. So what makes them choose, wisely? Like if they have to choose Spanish or French or Hindi, so how do they, what is the criteria?
I would definitely say that it gets evolved in multiple, it can get decided on multiple grounds. Ground number 1 could be interest, that I want to study this language because it helps me. But if you want to have a more rational basis, if you may, I mean again, if at all, could be a language requirement that you might need like multiple years down the line. So it could be a language requirement of a certain space you require, or of universities perhaps, but I don't want to think of that. It's primarily governed by interest is what I would say.
May I just add something? So what happens is, on a ground level, you must have noticed even during the transition, we expose students to all 3 languages. We made it a point that students understand what is happening in each language so that they get an idea that, okay, I am more comfortable with this and I'm not so comfortable with that. The same thing happens when they move to MYP. The very first week or almost 1.5 weeks is what we allow them to explore languages. So we give them that opportunity, okay, let's say there are students who are interested in French and Hindi. So we say, okay, for 2 lessons or 1 lesson, go and attend a French class, for the next lesson, go and attend a Hindi class, and then see how you feel. Do you feel comfortable? A, do you feel comfortable with that language? B, do you think that you would like to continue? C, we try to tell them don't make the decision on the basis of your friends. Because that's something that students are very sorely tempted to do. My friend is doing Spanish, I do Spanish. So it's a good idea for you also to have a conversation at home that you remove friends from the equation and you take this call based on your interest. You also have students at times who always are very keen and are able to pick up some languages more easily or are more fascinated. We had a student who was very interested in the French cuisine. She knew the terminology and she said, I want to take French because it's very clear and elegant. I'm interested in it. But we had some students who felt Spanish was more familiar in terms of the pronunciation. So it's a call that each one takes. There are some students who prefer Hindi because the Hindi that we speak on a daily basis is very different from the Hindi literature or the Hindi that we study. So it's also essential that we don't discard Hindi and we say that give it the credit that is due to it as a beautiful language and explore all 3 with an open mind and then take that decision.
Yeah. But they will have that experiment right?
Yeah. Just a bit to add to it, so that I have said, you'll be surprised that sometimes your kids are influenced by your travels also, or the storybooks that you have read as parents to them, and some name might just get stuck in their heads, which is also either a French name or a Hindi name or a Spanish name. So I think children get feeds from multiple places and that becomes their choice. So don't be zapped or surprised by it. Embrace it, and when they grow, there is a scope for them to delve more into the culture. And we do look at opportunities where children come back from their travels and fuse that learning into the classroom also. Yeah, so that's also an area of thinking about choice of language.
Yeah, so it becomes a choice that they do. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to quickly move on because an important aspect I want to touch upon is assessments. Because I know that will be something that you want to know what's happening with the assessments. They look different from marks, they look different from percentages. So what do they look for? Yeah. So the assessments that we have are essentially based on criteria. Now this word you're going to listen to for the next 5 minutes. Criteria. What's happening with criteria? Criteria A, criteria B. I have criteria C now. So you keep hearing that. What are these criteria? Very simply put. These criteria basically are skills you require for a subject. For example, language acquisition, like we're talking about. What are the skills you require? Reading, writing, speaking, listening. Those are my 4 criteria. So my assessment is on reading, speaking, writing, listening. In humanities, I need to know about something because I need to know my terminology. What is the population pyramid? I need to know that. I need to be able to research on that. So research becomes one. I need to be able to communicate what I'm trying to say in social sciences. And I also need to be critically thinking about social sciences. My fourth criteria, knowing, researching, investigation methods, thinking critically and communicating. So four criteria are assessed for each subject. They are different depending on the subject. So in math it's different, in science it's different, in social science it's different, English is different. Right? So each criteria has a grade level out of 8. That is, each particular criteria is assessed out of 8. That is not marks, it is levels of achievement. If you want to be in the 7-8 category of thinking critically, you should have told me 3 sources evaluated and told me the pros and cons of it. If you had to be in the level 5-6 category, you should have told me about 2 sources but not gone into so much depth. If you came into 1 and 2, that perhaps means that you did not attempt to evaluate at all. So it is not marks, it is grade level achievement. That is, what did your work tell me? So every grade level has a descriptor to it. That is, if I want to get 7-8 in this task, I had to show this. You showed this, therefore you got 7-8. 1. Second, every subject will total have a grade out of 7. Now how does that get calculated? 4 criteria, each criteria into 8. How much?
32.
32. If you got between 27 and 32 in the total, you will get a 7 in that subject. That's the highest. If you, for example, got a 24, it will probably be a 6. That distinction is done by the IB already. What we do is when we assess them, we look at what that work shows about the level achievement. That is, how dense was that work depending on the criteria I was judging. Therefore, that becomes 4 criteria. I assess each of them. I give a score out of 8 for I give a grade level achievement out of 8. Total becomes 32. Out of that, depending on what your total is, you get a grade of 1 to 7. 7 is the highest in a subject. 8 is the highest in a criteria. Criteria is not marks. 7 is not marks. This is grade level. If a child gets a 6 or 7, that means they have mastered the requirements of that subject at that point. If they are getting a 3, 4, we need to be a little worried about what's happening. And if they are at a 1 or 2, then we need to be extremely worried about what are they doing. Summative assessments happen 4 times a year. That is September, October, December, March, May. Please don't plan any engagements at this time. Do not take them out. So, and if I were to give you a rough idea, basically how it pans out is, you do your summative one almost at the time of the midterm break. Almost. I wouldn't say right the next day becomes a midterm break, but almost that time. December is mostly around the winter break. March again around the midterm break. And May around the end of the year. So it's mostly like that. You can think of it roughly like that. 4 times a year. Report cards come to you twice a year. December and May. They will not come to you for summative 1 and summative 3. You won't have a report card. How will you know? Total. Total is a whole separate conversation for everyone. I know some of you know total very well. Some of you need to know total very well. You will get report cards twice a year. Summative 2 and summative 4. In that I will report 2 summatives. In that I will report 2 summatives. Twice. And how will that happen? The best fit comes. That is, again, I will talk when I talk about total. I don't want to overdo you right now. But basically, you can expect a report card in December from us, before you hit your winter break, and in May, when you hit for a summer break. Okay. And 4 times summative. Formatives throughout the year. Formatives don't stop. They happen all the time. Summative, scheduled, I will tell you, I will communicate a schedule to you. You will know they're happening in the month of this. About 4 weeks prior, roughly, I will communicate the details of what's happening. But you know what's happening in class. If you've been following with the child or toddler, you will know what's happening, and that is all getting assessed. So your grade levels look like this. This is of course not from a subject, it is just a casual one. So if you have to build a good house, If you, for example, had to get about a 3-4 on that, on this task of building a good house provides some protection against wind and rain, but may have leaks or minor weaknesses. House can maintain the heat or cool, but with some effectiveness. House has a space for 4, but has some limitations. House design is generally effective with minor limitations. If you fulfill all of this, you get a roughly 3-4. However, if you want to go higher, and students know this by the way before they're doing the assessment, we are not playing the game before without telling them the rules. How can you play the game if you don't know the rules, right? We are telling them the rules. We are telling them this is what it is. Master. That's so 5-6. House provides effective protection against this. House can keep cool in summer and maintain heat in winter. House has enough space, rooms, bathrooms, are a family of 4. House design looks good and suits the surrounding environment. Slightly more refined than 3-4. Slightly better work. Slightly more skill show. And then 7-8 will be beyond. So they know this. You will know this. You will have all of this with you. For your subjects. It's about students working on building this. So you know what the rules of the game are before you get to play it. That's this. Okay, so I'm going to quickly run. I know we're almost at time, actually beyond it. So I'm just going to briefly tell you a few things. You will hear something on global context. Now what is global context? Please don't worry about it. It is just about learning the unit in a certain form. I will give you a very quick example. You can ignore that one right now. I can study the world, and now imagine what I'm saying. You can study the world with the lens of power. Which countries are more powerful, which leaders are more powerful, you can study. You can study the world through globalization. What's happening with trade. You can study the world through conflicts. You can study the world through cooperation. You can study the world through organization. Every time you will look at different things. I can study leadership through the lens of influence. How influential, how to become an influential leader. I can study leadership in terms of organizations. What am I doing? Every time looking at the world and looking at a concept from different lenses. If I look at the world through power, it is very different. If I look at the world through economic trade, it's a very different understanding. We are choosing what lens we are teaching with. Every lens is different. So if I'm studying cells and atoms, I may not be studying it just as cells and atoms. I'm studying it because I want to understand the human impact on the environment. So I'm not studying cells and atoms just like that because I felt like, chalo, let's put it in our unit. I am studying because I want to see a certain benefit of it. And the benefit is to study how humans impact the environment. Connection seems too far, but that's the job of the teacher and us and you. Yeah. So global context is just giving a lens to why we're studying. Again, I can study all of these people, great leaders of the world, through how they lived their lives, what was their influence, what was their historical context. Different lenses I can study the same. So I'm not going to do a lesson on Nelson Mandela just because saying Nelson Mandela was born here, this is what his life was, this is what he did, this is what he could not do. Thank you, Chaplain. That's not how it is. Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, all of them have something in common. So we'll study all of them for a reason. Global context is a reason. So when we see global context, please don't worry about it. It is just a lens by which I'm giving you a purpose of why we study. I won't go much into this. This is a later discussion perhaps. But for everything that we do, our vision, mission, core values stay the same. They are not different. Whatever we study, whatever we teach, this stays. What we are infusing is a lot of us in the units. So when you see MYP at Prometheus School, it will be different from MYP at another school. Why? Because there is no prescribed chapters or prescribed units I have to teach. I teach units because I want to teach them to my students. So I am passionate about what I am making. I am designing what I am teaching. Nobody is telling me what to have to do. So as a teacher, I am owning my unit more. So let's say I am a social science teacher. I want to teach economic units in grade 6-7. But I'm giving an example. Let's say Ms. Khushbu says, you know what, I don't want to do economics so much in grade 6-7, I want to bring that up in grade 8. That's a conversation as a department we have. What do you want to do where and when? Our units will not be the same as any other school's units. Could be, but that won't happen. MYP takes a very unique character in each school. Our school focuses on sports. We allow flexibility on that. If you have a major sports event coming up, if you have a major Olympiad coming up, we give you that flexibility. We don't push for things when we don't have to. Entrepreneurship, big one for us again. As a school, we want to build that culture. How will that come? That will come in our subjects only. Other schools or other places don't have to do it. We have owned up to it because we are as a school saying it's a part of our vision. So what you will see here in units will not be the same as at other places. So it will be a good idea for you to engage with MYP as a program where the child is at the center, but the school has contextualized what they are wanting to teach. Yeah. So on that note, thank you so much again. This is my email ID, which is very simple, which is mypc@school.com. Please feel free to write to me at any point. And of course, we will meet again on Form Days, which is the first day of school, and we will talk about a lot of school things about, uniform, regularity, what is the method going to be of following in the school, what is the schedule going to look like. That becomes a part of Form Day, not today. Right? Today was just to get it again, dip your feet in the air. And then any questions, happy to take them. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. Yes, please.
I actually have two questions.
Yes.
Been dwelling on it for some time.
For some time, yes, please.
So, you say our kids just moved from PYP to MYP. Most of them are 10 years or most of them are 10 years. I guess 1 or 2 are 11 years old. And it's a 5-year journey.
Yeah.
Which is like when they'll be maturing from pre-teens to teenage.
Yeah.
And you said that we have to choose the language now. So, the language that they know as of now is just the ABC. And what we're talking about in grade 10, and it still comes in grade 10 to us,
Yeah.
will be much more mature.
Yes.
So, how do we help them take the right decision?
How would you?
It's choice, as you said, what they like. Right now they love eating chocolate, but they may not like it when they're in grades.
True.
5 or whatever. So how do you help them? Because we are not capacitated, trust me, to help them take that decision. You as teachers, part of IB, how do you help them take that decision?
I understand the health aspect of chocolate, but you also need to understand they will consume or eventually enjoy what they like. Whichever brand or more preference that they have of chocolates. So if they prefer having a specific kind of chocolate, they will enjoy it more and they will probably consume it more, and that's something that we can also look at knowledge. In general, to help them make this choice, like I said, irrespective of whether they go in for French, Spanish or Hindi, all 3 languages have equal importance. The change that comes in is that we've taken French medium, and if the student is doing well, we encourage them to go for other examinations beyond such as TELF. So that gets added to your portfolio, that gets added to the profile, and later in college time when you wish to apply to universities, France then becomes, or language or countries where French is spoken more frequently, becomes an easier opportunity or an easier place for you to target. Similarly, if you've looked at Spanish, Spain and other countries where Spanish is spoken more frequently gets looked at. We generally think that in Hindi it might just be India, but it's very interesting because there are a number of countries where they look at Hindi because it's gaining a very big, it's gaining huge importance in the front right now. So even if you've done well in Hindi as a language, it gets added and can be considered by all colleges around the world. And that's one of the reasons why we've taken these 3 languages. There was a question. These are the most common languages and the languages that are easier for students also to make a choice of. I can have 2 more, I'll just confuse them. Rather than getting that done, getting a clear focus. We have additional examinations for all languages, Hindi, Spanish as well as French, which they can do, and that gets added to their portfolio. In order to help them make the choice, it's very basic. The day and tell them to explore all 3. The first week they will go for all 3. Then have a conversation, what did they enjoy in it? Was it easier to follow? Not just on the basis of the teacher. Remember, your teachers will change over the years. It's not necessary that they remain the same. So tell them, did they enjoy the activity? Are they trying to speak it? It's also a good idea for you to show some videos in that same subject which are available on YouTube, so that you will have an idea they are able to have that conversation as well. So use those things. Now once that conversation is there, if you're still confused or the child is confused between those 2 languages, let us know. We as teachers, as coordinators will have a conversation with the child based on. I can understand what we are doing. So, have the conversation at home and then let us know. We will have the There will be some who will always find this particular language a challenge, but I can see that this child is doing better in that language. So those suggestions will also come in from our end, from our teachers, because they are the experts at the end of the day. So it's a two-way process. We have that discussion with the child one-on-one as well separately, but not in all cases, because most of them are able to make that choice and you will see them taking that decision.
It's actually something which is much easier than you
Yeah.
Being to, I'll also tell you one thing, that even if they study the same language, they are building their profile in terms of being a linguist. That's the larger point of having another language, that you become a linguist in some form, you understand how different languages work. But in grade 11, if let's say I will pick on the leafy question there, and you know to say that if you studied French for 5 years, and now you think you want to study Spanish, you can always go to Spanish ab initio when you come to grade 11. So that gets you the exposure for 2 years. And most universities look at you studying a foreign language for at least 2 years. So even if you take up another very different language, let's say you want to do Spanish again, as I said, 5 years you've done French and you want to do Spanish, take Spanish in grade 11, 2 years for that. If you take up the diploma. So Hindi does not have an ab initio because it's a cultural language for us. So it's Hindi B comes out immediately. But largely they can study 2 languages across 5-7 years. Yeah, and yes, yeah, and so that way it's so we will basically they can transition to another language. That's so please don't think it's a tough choice. It's not a very tough choice. Let them have the good time of understanding and learning a language that they want to learn. So they do.
We just are not sure whether that might be right or not. Yeah.
They are very sure to want to read.
They don't want to write Hindi. And
They
that's
don't want to
exactly
write
that I feel as a parent, because you need to write Hindi, right? That's your mother tongue. You need to know how to write Hindi.
But then that's only
Might
language
I
that you
just
can
add something? So for next year, what we've also done is we've introduced some clubs, wherein we are not just looking at clubs like drawing, visual arts, or sculptures being done. We are also looking at languages being introduced in the clubs. So there are some of us who do feel that while I might students might feel that I don't want to study Hindi as a subject, but I do feel I want to learn about it. So they can take Hindi as a club and they can study in another language. The same thing is also offered. We're offering Sanskrit next year, if I'm not wrong. That's also another language that we're offering. So they have these opportunities available to them to explore languages beyond any. It becomes a subject which will be assessed.
Something interesting.
Absolutely. And this becomes an interest area that they follow. So we have very interesting club opportunities also available for students to take up.
Delhi. So there are examinations available, and as school we are very happy for the students to give them, and students are benefited from what happens in class. They're able to do well at these exams, at Delhi, etc. So that's something that they take up very keenly, and we would encourage you to encourage them to take these up as well. So these are good qualifications or good levels to achieve in language. It's looked at very well across anywhere they go. It's looked at very well. You're doing these extra exams. Of course, if they're comfortable.
So do you have such examinations like Olympiads and all? My child comes from CBSE background and there is Olympiads and everything.
So we go to Olympiads. Absolutely. So we have the science Olympiad, the math Olympiad, the English Olympiad. We have those as well, and we also have something called the benchmarking test that we did last year with ACER. So we do a lot of these to give students those extra opportunities, and we tell them in due time that it's happening, and we have a day called out in school, and then they're able to take this. So Olympiads are pretty much present, very much present. And we're also a SAT center, just for everyone's knowledge. I mean, that again comes in the form day as well, but we are a SAT center as well, so we use the SAT exam.
We have PSATs as well.
And PSAT as well. PSAT is also there, which students can take. So these are extra exams that they can continue doing, and we give them those opportunities. We let you know in due time that it's happening, this is happening, that's happening. So you'll have enough information. So not an explicit focus in terms of the class on the Olympiad, but a lot of the material that gets covered in the Olympiads gets covered in classes for that grade level as well. And I'm sure if they're studying the book, the Olympiad books, that's what we give them. So if they have a problem there, they can always access the teacher, and that will not be a problem. But as such, explicitly, we do not have classes for Olympiad. Same is the case with Delhi and Delhi. We don't explicitly focus teaching, students are able to do different delivery. So it becomes a byproduct of what we do. If there's anything specifically required for these, teachers will be more than happy. We have teachers who are very well equipped to deal with delivery and Olympics. Yes, please. Please.
So, at the onset, I really appreciate the fact that you are also including other languages, if not as a subject, but as a club, or just because, we don't want our, while we are very fascinated by the fact that they should learn the foreign language, it does open up a greater avenue across the globe. But then you have wonderful universities in India too, and so children could go and study there. So, while I'm sure, ma'am, you would know better, as in Hindi is not a prerequisite for some child to go in for a course in India as such, unless it's the language itself. But we definitely, as my friend here said, we want our children to know the language also. We don't want to alienate them from their own language. So that basic should be there, and that is something we would really appreciate.
Thank you for bringing that out. But here is where I think you and us, we need to do partnership. I don't know, even as a parent, I feel sometimes guilty. When I raised my son, there were certain commands at home which I used to give in English. That was my limitation as an English teacher. How much is good English, good Hindi we are using at home is something that we need to really reflect. How much literature are we getting into the usage of Hindi? Like, has Hindi become more colloquial in the way we speak Hindi? Is it limited to, I think not even our house helps these days. We take pride, and I'm talking about Delhi primarily. I'm from South Delhi, I live there, and that's a very big thing that if you speak in English with your house help, it's the big deal. It's a notion that we live with. So I think we have to inculcate and encourage our own speaking of Hindi, and let's get more purity in our own usage of Hindi, which is where we and you can ensure that the children don't speak in improper Hindi or make fun of Hindi or Hindi only as a choice of foul language. That is what is a pain for us also, just like it is for you. We are looking at Hindi more seriously with respect to, kind of having Hindi clubs and the Sanskrit club that we talked about. And it is really important because if some of our events have children, doing a rendition of Sanskrit shlokas, I think it will add to the beauty of the school and the from local to global kind of a thought process which I really believes in. So there is where I think we all need to be on the same page. How much is Hindi being used effectively at home and in school? And I think we should just be together on it, right? So we definitely in the club we will talk about Hindi good books, like we have to have Premchand Udan, maybe an extract from that. We have to have good Hindi poets. Their work is very meaningful, and we must talk about that, right? Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you so much. It's really short over, but I'm so glad that you all stuck around. Thank you again. We